My name is Matthew Kane, and this is the Dirty Air F1 podcast.
A 9 blind up the hill. Just all throttle, isn't it? All the way round. How's it looking for the sectors, Crofty?
Advantage Hamilton so far from Verstappen and Bottas, but Perez with a personal best 21.8 through that first sector. He is within contention as well. 28.7 for Hamilton, matched by Valtteri Bottas in the middle sector. Verstappen is off the pace by about a tenth and a half at the moment. It's looking good for Lewis Hamilton and for Mercedes, but don't forget, Verstappen mighty strong in the final sector, and Lewis wasn't great coming out of the chicane there. Hamilton crosses the line. Provisional pole is his, but he doesn't improve on his time. Valtteri Bottas next to cross the line. He denied Hamilton last week. Can he do it again? No, he can't. So it's Hamilton and Verstappen and Bottas. Can Verstappen get pole? No, he can't get pole, but his teammate Sergio Perez is going well behind. Out of the final corner now. Realistically, one car to deny Hamilton pole today, and Perez doesn't. It's a ton of poles for Lewis Hamilton in Formula One. The Spanish Grand Prix pole, his 100th in his Formula One career.
That's nice work, very nice work. So yeah, that first time stood.
Yes! Great job, guys. That was hard work. Oh, that was hard work.
Yeah, you bet you, Lewis. That wasn't easy, was it?
100 pole positions. That is absolutely unbelievable. Congratulations, Sir Lewis. That is something that I never ever thought would happen in Formula One. And let's be clear, he didn't just break a record by getting his 100th pole position. He's breaking his own records. Second on the all-time list is Michael Schumacher with 68 poles. If you want to put this in further perspective, you can add Mika Hakkinen, Nigel Mansell, and Alain Prost together, and they don't have as many poles as Lewis Hamilton does. I sit here wondering what the final number will be. It's been recently reported that Mercedes are looking to sign a 2-year extension with Lewis, which only confirms some of the things that I was stating about a month ago with regards to the first seat at Mercedes, and then now who would fill the second seat. I haven't even said hello yet. I'm so distracted by Lewis's achievement here. Hi, everybody. This is Matthew. Welcome to the Dirty Air F1 podcast. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed at 100 pole positions. Sorry, I didn't know how else to start the show. I mean, that was just the way it had to be. It's such a remarkable achievement. I mean, you can add Michael Schumacher and Juan Manuel Fangio's pole positions together. That's only 97. There's still 3 shy. Lewis is at the prime of his life, peak fitness, peak mental health. He's got a fantastic team, fully supporting him. What's the final number going to be? 150? 150? Can you imagine that? Or what about if he just wins the next couple of races but doesn't get pole? And then his stats are 100, 100. Steering wheel drop, and I'm out. That would be unbelievable. So here we are, Catalunya. A lot to be said about Catalunya. I mean, I could probably spend the next half an hour talking about this circuit. Firstly, it's one we know, right? This is where most of the teams do their preseason testing. This circuit has it all, right? Long straights, short straights, slow speed corners, high speed corners, lots of load. I mean, this really does test the overall package of the car. And you can tell if you have the pace around Catalunya, then you're probably going to have the pace overall, at least be ahead of the pack throughout the duration of the season. Going into it, I wasn't sure if Red Bull were the favorite or not. To all the experts at the race, they all said that the Mercedes were the favorite. Well, they all said that after qualifying. I think anybody really knew going into it. And despite not improving in his final run in qualifying, Lewis manages to get pole. And if you look, the only person who did improve in their final run there in qualifying was Charles Leclerc. I mean, he was dynamite all weekend as well, wasn't he? Whew. Wow, what a great drive from him. And you know what? Kudos to Ferrari. They are the most improved team this year, bar none. Well, it's proved statistically as far as their pace goes relative to last year's pace, but Ferrari are still doing a top-notch job. Not long before they're really challenging for podium positions, no doubt. No doubt. Well, there it is. Whew. It's off my chest. Got to breathe now. Wow, that was amazing. I just chatted. Thanks for listening. If you don't already follow me on Twitter, please do. It's dirty_F1. And my website is www.thedirtyairf1.com. And on Instagram and YouTube, I am the Dirty Air F1 Podcast. Please follow, like, subscribe, say hey, comment, get in on the action. That's what this is all about. Having a good time with the F1 family. So as per usual, I'm about to go through my race recap with who qualified where and how they raced and my opinion about their overall performance. Once again, I'd love to hear if you agree or disagree or what your own opinions are in my comments. As per usual, I try not to pull any punches, but I also try to be respectful. And in this area, I feel like I failed. I feel like I failed last week. I feel like a bit of a bully, to be honest. So I'm going to have a reset here. I'm going to find some balance. I'm going to find serenity and peace without judgment. Here we go. Qualifying in 23rd position in a 20-man field. Everyone's favorite F1 rookie, Nikita Mazepin. Mazepin. Everyone, put your hands together for Mazepin. If you tuned in last week, you'll remember that I actually gave Nikita a rating of 0. And I can't give him a rating of 0, but he did just about everything he did last week, this week as well. Let's see, he blocked the leader. Check. He finished almost a minute behind his teammate. Check. He blocked somebody in qualifying. Check. Basically, what we have now found out about Nikita Mazepin is he's not ready to be in Formula One. No disrespect to him, but he is not ready to be in Formula One. You can actually hear on the team radio that he honestly is not trying to make these mistakes. A lot of the times he just doesn't even realize he's in the way, and the team isn't really doing anything to help him. It actually took Gunther Steiner to get on the radio and just tell him, listen, stop apologizing, just get on with it, let's go. And I actually thought that was some pretty strong leadership shown by Gunther Steiner, just to step in for his young driver and say, hey, listen, you're going to make mistakes, let's just get on with it. I think one of the best things that they could do for him right now would be to honestly take him out of the race seat and have him just driving in free practice. This would, A, take the spotlight off him, give him a little bit of time, get a little bit of breathing room, learn his craft, etc. B, he get a chance to work on his fitness. And C, he gets to become a little bit more comfortable with the car and he gets a little bit of confidence before that's all gone. Because as we saw, look how important confidence is. Look at Alex Albon. We all know that Alex can drive. Where is he now? If Nikita has any future in this sport besides his father's backing, I think it's best for him to step out of the race seat right now and relegate himself to free practice for the next few races. What do you think? Leave your comments below. I'd love to read them. But again, let's keep it about racing. I mean, the usual Mazepin nonsense. I mean, we can go there, but let's not. Let's talk about Mazepin as an actual race car driver, because you know what? I'm guilty of not really paying attention to the lower formulas. I'm not familiar with Nikita Mazepin's background. Does he have talent? Does he have a chance with the proper backing and the proper opportunity? Is he going to be successful in Formula One? I don't know. But I do know right now that he's not good enough to be in Formula One as we speak. I will give it to him, though. I've never seen the FIA thing come up on the screen where the FIA was speaking. And it was the conversation between Toto and the FIA, and with regards to Lewis being held up by Mazepin when he was leading the race. I guess we owe Mazepin a debt of thanks. We've never seen that before on the telecast. He finished over 2 laps down. He was 50 seconds behind Mick, and only 25% of the time was he ever posting faster laps than Mick. So he's not on the pace. He's in the way. He's incurring penalty points. He's ruining whatever reputation he had as a race car driver. I think it's time for them to do the right thing. What do you think? Pull the plug. Pull the plug, let him drive some free practice. You know what? Reach out to Alfa Romeo because of the Ferrari connection. Bring in Kubica. Kubica could handle the car for a couple of races. I mean, do you really want Mazepin driving a Formula One car around Monaco? Oh, dear. Whew, oh, dear. Thankfully, he did bring the car home in one piece, and he didn't finish last, thanks to the fuel pressure issue that Tsunoda had, and Nikita Mazepin finished 19th. Nikita, I'm giving you a rating of 2 out of 10. Take it and go. Qualifying in 19th position was Nicholas Latifi. This was an important bounce-back week for Nicholas after the performance in Portimao where he felt like he was driving a completely foreign car. He was still struggling with the car in free practice before they got to qualifying, where in Q1 he was knocked out, and his teammate George Russell was 0.8 of a second faster. Mr. Saturday was through once again until Q2, and Nicholas wasn't. The team is yet to understand why the car came back to both of those drivers on race day, but it did, and Nicholas closed the gap between George and himself. Pretty dramatically, it must be said. I mean, 0.8 in qualifying, and then the race pace was down to 0.4. And if you split up the lap times, they were pretty even. In fact, they were the most even of the field. 45% of the time, Nicholas Latifi had faster laps during the race than George. I found that both incredibly surprising and very encouraging. By race end, he found himself up into P16. So all in all, a very good performance. Especially since they haven't quite put their finger on what makes that car tick yet. I mean, we don't expect it to be competitive, but it has certainly shown signs of some pace if they get it right on race weekend. All in all, a very good performance by Latifi and a great bounce back. And I rate his performance this weekend as 7 out of 10. Qualifying in 18th position was Mick Schumacher. The more I think about what Mick is facing right now on a day-to-day basis, the more I truly, truly appreciate him. It's one thing to be the son of a 7-time world champion. It's another thing to be the defending F2 world champion. And unfortunately for him, he finds himself in a team that has already said they're not going to be developing that car this year. And I believe after 4 races, it's fair now to question the type of feedback and data that his teammate is providing to the team. Mick is essentially a one-man team in a 2-year-old car. He's had the better of Nikita all season long, and nothing changed this past weekend, where he qualified 7/10 ahead of his teammate. And then he got off to a fantastic start, passing 4 cars on the first lap. Unfortunately, that was missed, as the action was fast and furious at the front and had our attention. He was quicker than his teammates 75% of the time, and even managed to mix it up with Latifi for a little while, which was great for some racing experience. He brought the car home safely in P18. He's now gone 4-0 against his teammate, and despite finishing 2 laps down, as I've stated from the beginning, the best way to do this is to rate him against his teammate, who was 50 seconds behind him. Mick, well done. I'm giving you a 7.5 out of 10, and I think it's time that I officially register for the Mick Schumacher fan club. Qualifying in 17th position was Kimi Raikkonen. The Alfa Romeo had been showing some pace recently, and this would be easy to look at Kimi and point the finger and say, what happened in qualifying? When you compare Alfa's race pace at Catalunya from 2021 to 2020, they're the only team on the grid who actually is slower. Their pace was actually 0.3 a lap slower. And as I mentioned earlier, poor performance relative to your competition around Catalunya usually doesn't bode well for you over the course of a full season. Luckily for Alfa and Kimi, they got the strategy spot on, and Kimi was the only car of the whole field to start on the medium tire. And it wasn't long before he found himself all the way up into P5, 12 places from his starting position. Kimi then pitted for the soft tires. Unfortunately, they didn't last all the way till the end, and they fell off the cliff. He was defenseless in a late battle with Gasly and Stroll, and ended up finishing in P12 just outside the points. All in all, an incredible drive, overlooked by most, and I give Kimi a rating of 8.5 out of 10. Qualifying in the 16th position was Yuki Tsunoda.
Box, P16 na Yuki, P16.
I can't fucking believe this car! So we're out yet for Q1?
Yes.
Didn't take too long for the shine to wear off of Yuki Tsunoda, did it? There's no question that the AlphaTauri lacked pace at Catalunya, judging by Pierre Gasly's P12 in qualifying, after consistently being in the top 6. The AlphaTauri wasn't happy here in Catalunya, and Yuki wasn't happy in the AlphaTauri. After bowing out in Q1, Yuki actually questioned whether or not he and Pierre were driving the same car. I don't know. I've listened to the audio clip. I think this is a situation where there's a little bit lost here in translation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like a really interesting. It's quite almost quite opposite. So, and even the same setup. So I don't know. Is the character of the car or the driving? But it consistently every race week, every track is opposite. So especially from Portugal. So have to see why and. Maybe if I find the reason why there, I think it's good pace, good space to learn. So I have to talk with the engineer, but I don't know at the moment.
His comments were seen as a criticism to the team, and he immediately apologized. Things didn't get better on race day for Yuki, as he was the first to retire with a fuel pressure problem. Honda immediately vowed to get to the bottom of the problem. I'm not even sure how to rate this performance by Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, he didn't drive very well in practice. He didn't do very well in qualifying. He outwardly complained about the car, criticized the team, but then manned up and apologized for it, and then went out with a technical issue. I think it's a big thing to apologize in front of the world press. I can't imagine what that feels like. And you know what? You don't get to this level unless you're a pretty fiery competitor. Obviously, he wants to do well. I think he'll tone it down, especially if the team gets around him and he gets some good advice. But obviously results have to start appearing here for not only AlphaTauri but for Yuki Tsunoda. I'm going to rate his performance this weekend as 3 out of 10. Qualifying in 15th position was Mr. Saturday, George Russell. George once again outqualified his teammate Latifi by close to 0.8 of a second. Williams were one of the teams that gambled on the one-stop strategy in Catalunya. And initially, it looked like that gamble was about to pay off. It wasn't until the very end that George lost a few spots once his tires went off. Once again, we saw George in 11th position, knocking on the door, trying to score his first points in his F1 career. He ended up finishing one place higher than he qualified, in 14th. All in all, a great day for him and for the team. I think the most encouraging thing as well was after the race, George said that the car had never felt that good before in all his time with Williams. And he absolutely loved driving it on race day. Now, before you jump to conclusions and say Williams is back, he did attribute this to the fact that the low wind conditions in Catalunya certainly helped the design of their car and therefore the performance. All in all, though, another fantastic outing by George, and I would rate his performance as 8 out of 10. Qualifying in 14th position was Antonio Giovannazi. Antonio, who's definitely on the hot seat in 2021, seems to be starting to show a little bit of pace. And in Catalunya, he outqualified Kimi by 0.4. Alfa Romeo gambled and brought Giovannazi in as soon as the first safety car came out. He was the first of everyone to pit, and it looked like it was going to be a masterstroke. Unfortunately for Antonio, if he didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck, because one of the tires didn't have any air in it. Alfa Romeo's head of track engineering said the deflated tire was due to a damaged valve in the garage, but it's not yet clear how the damage happened. Needless to say, Antonio's race was completely compromised, and once he came back out of the pits, he was now behind the Williams. Antonio's pace for the remainder of the race remained exactly the same as Kimi's, give or take a few laps due to traffic. Unfortunately for Antonio, the 3 positions that he beat Kimi by in qualifying were what Kimi beat him by in the race. And the best that Antonio could do would be P15, 1 spot higher than he qualified in. Despite all this, you know what? He showed great pace this weekend. And this was just unfortunate what happened to him with the flat tire incident. It completely ruined his race. Other than that, I think he actually would have put in a pretty strong performance and possibly would have scored some points. I'm actually going to rate Antonio's drive as a 7.5 out of 10. Qualifying in 13th position was Sebastian Vettel. I've got to say, sadly, this is starting to no longer feel like a surprise. Going into this race, both the Aston Martins were going to be fitted with the new upgrades, and they were expecting that it might lead to half a second improvement per lap. For the first time this season, in free practice, it looked like Seb was actually on Lance's pace. That was until qualifying. The gap was only a 10th, but Lance was still quicker. Now, after 4 races, yes, Sebastian is still getting used to the car. As we have seen, all the drivers who have switched teams this year have struggled to acclimate themselves to the cars. I can't actually remember a year where this was such a problem for them. Regardless, Sebastian Vettel is still a 4-time world champion, and he is being outperformed by Lance Stroll. So we have to start asking ourselves some hard questions. Has Sebastian lost a step? Is Lance Stroll better than you gave him credit for? Was Sebastian ever that good in the first place? Well, we won't go there. In his defense, statistically speaking, the Aston Martin is technically the slowest car in comparison to its times in 2020 around Catalunya, when it was then known as Racing Point. I can't imagine being Lawrence Stroll, pouring in hundreds of millions of dollars and going 0.8 of a second slower. I think I'd lose my mind. It's a wonder that Sebastian hasn't lost his yet. After a long, hard-fought, grueling race, he finished exactly where he started, in P13. And I'm not really sure there was much more in it, but again, he finished behind Lance. And I would rate Sebastian Vettel's performance as 5 out of 10. Qualifying in 12th position was Pierre Gasly. I was a little bit surprised at how much AlphaTauri struggled at Catalunya, because to see Pierre Gasly in this position in qualifying certainly tells me that something about that car didn't agree with the circuit, because Pierre's driving's been on point this year. His results haven't shown it, but he's certainly had the pace. And he certainly had the pace over his teammate Yuki Tsunoda all throughout practice, and then finally out qualifying him by 0.4. Taking into consideration that Yuki's race was over by lap 7, Pierre was still averaging over a second a lap faster than him during those early stages of the race. Now you might say, oh, there's traffic here, there's traffic. Sure, there's traffic. There's traffic where they both are. Being a second a lap faster in the early parts of a race is massive, especially around a circuit where it's hard to pass. Once again, I think a poor result masks the fact that Gasly was putting in a masterful drive. And if it hadn't been for the very beginning of the race where he incurred a penalty, as he pulled up to the starting grid, his lead tire had just rolled over the line that designated the boundary of his grid box. This led to 5 seconds of additional time after a pit stop, and it essentially ruined Gasly's race. Pierre ended up winning a few late race battles with Stroll and Kimi, and ended up finishing in 10th place, collecting a point. He was still furious, though, knowing that he could have caught Ocon had it not been for the penalty. Again, another strong drive from Pierre, I would say. Nothing outrageously strong, but strong overall, and I would give Pierre a rating of 7 out of 10. Qualifying in 11th position was Lance Stroll. I thought going into this race that Sebastian was going to get the upgrades, as opposed to Lance, who got them last race, but it turned out that both of them got the upgrades for Catalunya, which was great. Seb seemed to have a little bit of a pace advantage over Lance in practice, but come qualifying, Lance just got him. And come race day, in all fairness, I think Lance was wringing every last piece of performance out of that car. Whatever upgrades they brought to Catalunya didn't work. And I'm surprised considering how well the Mercedes worked at Catalunya, and what a dog the Aston Martin was. Now you really see the big difference between the big teams and the mid teams, right? Look at Aston Martin. Their new factory is going to be ready next year, but it's not ready yet. And look at how Mercedes has been able to recover since preseason testing. And now Aston Martin has fallen behind. And despite the car's poor performance, we were treated to a wonderful fight between Lance and Fernando. Now Fernando's tires might have been a little bit older, but still, it was great side-by-side racing. It may not have been up at the front, but it was still great racing with great respect between two drivers. And Lance came out on top. Lance ended up finishing in 11th place, which meant just like his teammate, he finished the race exactly where he started it. Overall, I think Lance drove very strongly this weekend, and I would give him a rating of 8 out of 10. Qualifying in 10th position was Fernando Alonso. Alpine had brought a number of upgrades to the car in preparation for the Spanish Grand Prix. And early on throughout practice, it certainly looked like Alpine was on the pace. No doubt, much like the Williams, they benefited from the low wind conditions. Now normally, P10 would be celebrated after the start that Fernando has had this year. But when you consider that his younger teammate Esteban Ocon qualified in 5th, it makes you wonder what's left in that car, if anything. Or are we looking at a similar situation between Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll? Or perhaps the old lion has seen his best days? Alpine's race was undone when they decided to go with a one-stop pit strategy. And at lap 44, those tires were done, and Alonso was going backwards. Despite fighting as hard as he could to hold everybody off, Alonso finished in P17, 7 places higher than he qualified, and 8 places higher than his teammate. After the race, he was quoted as saying that his very best right now is not as good as Ocon. And I would have to agree. And I rate Fernando Alonso's performance this weekend as a 6.5 out of 10. Qualifying in 9th position was Lando Norris. Very strange weekend for Lando, I gotta say. When you look at the lap charts, Daniel Ricciardo was faster 80% of the time. And when you consider that it was only a few races ago that Ricciardo was moving over for Lando, one has to wonder, what has McLaren done to this car? Is it just a one-off? Or have they done something to try and help Daniel get a little bit more comfortable with it, which he obviously was? I mean, don't forget Lando was still quicker in Q1 and Q2. But come race day, his pace was noticeably gone. Interesting race for Lando. He still moves up 2 positions from where he qualified from P10 up to P8. But something was missing from him this weekend, and it was an uncharacteristic display, based on what we've already seen so far this season. I'm a little mystified, but I'm still going to give Lando Norris's performance this weekend as a 7 out of 10. Qualifying in 8th position was Sergio Perez. Certainly a frustrating result for Sergio, especially when you consider he's starting to show some pace in that Red Bull. He got off to a great start, making up 2 positions right away, but then found himself stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo. And it wasn't until lap 47 that he was able to finally make his move, and it was an excellent move at that. But by then, the damage had been done. Now, it's being said that Sergio then quickly built up his speed and was lapping close to the leader's pace, but I beg to differ. Now, taking traffic into account, that's one thing, but Sergio for most of the race was about a second off of Max's pace. And there's 0.8 between both of their best laps. This isn't even close. Despite that crazy gap in performance, he did manage to get the car up to P5, so all in all, it can't be that disappointing. But for Red Bull, they certainly need Sergio at the front, helping them battle Mercedes. Overall, I would rate Sergio's performance as a 7 out of 10 this weekend. But much like Bahrain and Imola, it's a bit of a mixed bag as far as how I feel about his results. Sergio did say it would take 4 to 5 races for him to get up to speed with Max. And race 5 is coming up in Monaco. All the best, Sergio. All the best, brother. I wouldn't want to try and find my footing around Monaco. No, thank you. Qualifying in 7th position was Daniel Ricciardo. Wow, what a surprise. The Honey Badger back from the dead. Great to see him with some pace finally. Hoo-hoo! Daniel looked comfortable in the McLaren from the get-go, and it led all the way into qualifying, where he beat Lando Norris by 4/10. He also got away to one of the best starts in the race, immediately overtaking Sainz and Ocon. After an epic battle, Perez did manage to get by him, but more importantly for Daniel was that he held off Carlos Sainz. All in, Daniel had a very, very promising race. It's great for his confidence, it's great for the team. P6, not bad at all, and I rate his performance this weekend as an 8.5 out of 10. Qualifying in 6th position was Carlos Sainz for Scuderia Ferrari. There is no question, of all the drivers who have switched teams on the grid, Carlos Sainz has been the one who has adapted the quickest. And no doubt, on his home turf in Spain, Carlos was on a mission, and it showed all weekend, as the pace between him and Leclerc was separated by only 1/10. Regrettably for Carlos, he got off to a poor start and was immediately passed by Ocon and Ricciardo. He did manage to repass Ocon, but never caught Ricciardo, and finished behind his teammate, Charles Leclerc. At the end of the day, Carlos had to settle for P7, 1 spot higher than he qualified. All things considered, a fantastic effort, and he's doing a fantastic job. I would rate Carlos Sainz's performance at the Spanish Grand Prix as an 8 out of 10. Qualifying in 5th position was Esteban Ocon. Dare I say, the 2018 version of Esteban Ocon has arrived. Although the gap has closed, he still showed pace over Fernando during practice and in qualifying. And by race end, he was leading Fernando by 30 seconds. When you look at their race laps, Esteban was faster than Fernando 77% of the time. Sadly for Esteban and Alpine, their one-stop strategy didn't pay off, and by lap 44, Esteban and Fernando's tires were completely shot, and the performance fell off to the point where they were 3 seconds a lap slower. As a result, Esteban finished all the way back in 9th, 4 places higher than he qualified, but still 8 places higher than his legendary teammate, Fernando Alonso. I think it's safe to say that Esteban, you're officially no longer on the hot seat. You are officially now a hot commodity. And I rate your performance in Catalunya as an 8.5 out of 10. Qualifying in 4th position for Scuderia Ferrari was Charles Leclerc. Charles has definitely been one of the standouts of the 2021 season thus far, and his performance in Catalunya may have just been his best yet. He managed to pass Bottas right at the start, and held him off until the end of the first stint. Charles continued to battle for the rest of the race, and when in comparison to Carlos, he was faster 70% of the time. No doubt that Charles has been inspired, and has found some new pace, thanks to his new teammate. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, based on the lap times around Catalunya, when you compare 2020 to 2021, Ferrari are the most improved team. I, for one, can't wait for Ferrari to find what's needed to help both of their young drivers challenge for race wins at the front. In my eyes, Charles leaves Catalunya with a rating of 9.5, headed home to his home Grand Prix in Monaco. Qualifying in 3rd position was Valtteri Bottas, 5.0. Valtteri spent much of press day in Catalunya denying rumors that he was about to lose his seat to George Russell, and it looked like he was using it as motivation as he was matching Lewis's pace all throughout practice and even bettered him in Q1 and Q2. But come Q3, Bottas was not only bettered by his teammate, but he was also bettered by Max. And as I mentioned in my last podcast, Mercedes don't mind if you lose to Lewis, but they don't like it when you lose to Max. And after losing a position to Charles at the start of the race, and spending his entire first stint stuck behind him, Bottas ensured the fact that he was never going to be a part of the mix up front, and he was going to be of no help to Mercedes strategy-wise. And despite being on a completely different strategy, and having pitted 7 laps earlier than Lewis, he was going to be of absolutely no use to his teammate either.
So Lewis will have DRS.
So we lost a bit of window to Leclerc there. Leclerc 22.4.
Now, I don't know about you, but first impressions from listening to that are, he's not exactly driving very fast, is he? Seems to me like he's a guy driving without a contract next year. Weird. He's also driving off the pace. With the exception of laps, I think it was 37 through 42 or 37 through 44, I'm not too sure. That was the only time that he had ever matched Lewis's pace the entire race. And when was the last time you saw Valtteri completely disregard a team order? In fact, he admitted after the race that he could have certainly made that a lot easier for Lewis, but he had his own race to run. Now, Valtteri, give me a break. You pitted 7 laps earlier. You can't fool this F1 veteran, my friend. I would just go ahead and state the plainly obvious. Valtteri Bottas 5.0 is here, and he won't be doing any favors for Lewis or Mercedes for the rest of the season. Mark my words. He started P3 in Catalunya, and that's exactly where he finished. He never challenged Max, and therefore I give Valtteri Bottas a rating of 7.5 out of 10. Qualifying in second position was Max Verstappen. Despite Max having the edge over Sir Lewis in Q1 and Q2, he fell short in Q3 and lined up in the second position on the grid. One thing Catalunya taught us for sure, in case we already didn't know, was that Max Verstappen would go for a gap in turn 1 if it was for the lead. No matter who it was against, he would go for it. And that's exactly what he did. And thankfully, Lewis bowed out of it a little bit, or else there would have been serious contact. Despite completely dominating his teammate and leading much of the race, Red Bull's one-stop strategy proved to be their undoing. At first, I assumed that this was going on because Red Bull had no more tires left, but that proved to be incorrect. It turns out that Red Bull actually had a brand new set of soft tires waiting in the garage with Max's name on them. Perhaps if Checo had been up in the mix, they would have been able to pit Max safely. But as it turned out, they chose not to, and they played the long game. To Max's credit, he made those tires last an awfully long time. But like he said following the race, he was a sitting duck when Sir Lewis arrived. Christian Horner was seen everywhere after the race, selling the fact that the Red Bull wasn't really on pace today. But you know what, Christian? I think you've got to own this one. This kind of goes in there with Bahrain. I don't fault Max for losing in Catalunya at all. In fact, we were all reminded during the telecast that this is just a mirror image of 2019 in Hungary, where Red Bull fell for the same Mercedes tricks. There's only so much that Max can do. Qualifying P2, leading most of the race, being failed by a poor team strategy and finally finishing second. Max Verstappen, I give you a rating at Catalunya of 9.5 out of 10. Christian Horner and the Red Bull team race strategists, not so much. Qualifying in pole position, his 100th pole position of his career, Sir Lewis Hamilton. And I'm very proud to say that I was actually at his very first pole position in Canada. And here I am, all these years later, podcasting about his 100th. Wow. Talk about surreal. Lewis started the weekend a little bit off the pace, trailing his teammate Valtteri. But when Q3 arrived, so did Lewis, and he managed to secure pole, despite the fact that he didn't improve his time on his second hot run. In fact, the only driver to improve his time on the second hot run was Charles Leclerc. Lewis got away to a decent enough start, but Max still managed to catch a little bit of a tow down the long straightaway leading into turn 1. Lewis knew what we all knew, and that was if Max had a chance to go for it, he would, and Max did have a chance for it. And thankfully, Lewis had the presence of mind to give him a little bit more space. Lewis remained in touch with the lead, while also keeping a safe enough distance away to escape some of Max's dirty air. It's a shameless plug, I know, I'm sorry. Once they both got on the mediums, though, it quickly became apparent that Lewis had no problem keeping up with Max and maintaining his pace, despite following in the dirty air. This is when Mercedes decided to do a two-stop strategy, and they pitted Lewis. This moment may prove to be definitive at the end of the season. Here we had Mercedes thinking on the fly and earning Lewis's trust, and it all worked out. Whereas on the other side, with Red Bull and Max, Max's total effort and flawless driving only resulted in him losing the lead and the race. Max didn't lose to Lewis today. Max lost to the Mercedes F1 team and their 7-time world champion, Sir Lewis Hamilton. With each passing race, this season is already starting to look like a foregone conclusion, and that is that Lewis Hamilton will win his 8th World Driving Championship. Now, he may or may not, but his performance in Catalunya made Christian Horner look like he was going to be sick after the race. And for that very reason, I am rating Lewis Hamilton's performance as 10 out of 10. All jokes aside, congratulations to Lewis on your 100th pole position and your phenomenal race win. Before the boys at Red Bull seek solace in 2022, word on the street is that Lewis is going to be extending his Mercedes contract for an additional 2 years. He's at the top of his game. He's healthy. He's happy. He's hungry. And after 4 races in the 2021 season, he's still better than you. And like many of those before you, you're starting to learn a valuable lesson. It's one thing to want to be a king. It's an entirely different thing to defeat a king.
As the winner of the Spanish Grand Prix for Lewis Hamilton, who strengthens his grip then at the top of the table. Red Bull, they thought they might have had the pace. Certainly in qualifying it was close, but the margin of victory in the end was 16 seconds between Hamilton and Verstappen. It's back to the drawing board, and it's Milton Keynes once again. Red Bull have brought the challenge to Mercedes and to Lewis Hamilton this year, and he's responded with victory once more. 4 races down, it's 3 wins for Hamilton, 1 for Verstappen, and the fizzy stuff, I'm sure, at Mercedes tastes an awful lot sweeter at the moment than it does at Red Bull.
Indeed it does. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I've been your host, Matthew Kane. If you don't already follow me on social media, please do. I'm Dirty_F1 on Twitter, and the Dirty Air F1 podcast on both YouTube and on Instagram. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune in today. Please like and subscribe, and don't be afraid to comment down below. Before you know it, Monaco will be here. And that means that I'll be here too. And until that time, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. As you can tell, I'm just delighted. It was just, it's been an amazing day. To come to Canada my first time, it's been tough, it's not an easy circuit to learn, and Fernando has been extremely quick, and so are the BMWs and Ferraris. But we dialed in the car in P3, and I had an opportunity to go out and put it on pole, and this time I took the opportunity and grabbed it with both hands and did the best job I could with it.